Hello again, YouTube. I know it has been a minute since I put out a video, but I've been distracted by life and things going on. So, anyway, let's talk about Godzilla vs. King Kong. So, first thing is first, spoiler warning for those who get upset by things being spoiled. I say with air quotes because I feel that only one detail was actually left out of the 30 plus trailers for this movie that appeared in the film, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But my initial take on this film is that I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Godzilla vs. King Kong was a good film and a great monster movie, or so I say, giant monster movie. It had what many giant monster fans like, which is a focused narrative on the monsters and a good showcase of them and their fighting. Now, there was obviously human narrative and a plot, in air quotation marks, to shift around the camera and to pull attention to different areas that attention needed to be focused on. I love that the film had this sort of narrative of humanizing Kong as well. In the opening scene featuring Kong, they played up the scene of an almost sort of slice of life quality to Kong, of him waking up and getting ready for his day. Essentially, kind of just like him going through a bathroom routine, even a shower scene where he uses a waterfall. And throughout the film, they showed that he is indeed a thinking creature with emotions and the capacity for communication directly to humans through sign language. I am also a fan of them delving deeper, pun, into the Hollow Earth, which is something that was discussed multiple times in the previous films, so it is good that they kept that continuity and included it in this latest film. The Hollow Earth was also this neat double world inside the planet. Essentially, the planet is split into two pieces, like a ball inside of a ball, each having their own gravitational pull. Because of this, you could walk on the ceiling of the Hollow Earth, and assumingly things did and thrived on both the upper and lower levels of the Hollow Earth. I enjoyed the inclusion of other kaiju, both old and new, to help flush out that other giant monsters do still exist, even though they are hardly seen, but that is fine as the focus stayed on Kong and Godzilla as it needed to. The opening scene did concern me a little, as it implied that nearly all the other reported surface kaiju had died, to include well known ones such as Rodan. But the re inclusion of the skull crawlers and the introduction of newer species, such as the warbats, gave reassurance that at least the G Man and Kong were not the last of the giant monsters in that universe, even though it does still seem that each is indeed the last of their respective species. I also enjoyed the inclusion of more advanced technology in this film. Though aliens did not make the cut, sci fi levels of tech have been a staple in Godzilla films almost as long as the kaiju combat has been. Granted, nothing like the Maser cannons or the Super X was in this film, but a subterranean cargo rail and the Heaves, a vehicle needed to enter the Hollow Earth, were a nice touch of sci fi influence that still kept a somewhat realistic design to fit into the setting. But the best piece of tech was, of course, Mecha Godzilla himself. While definitely not what I would think is the best design for him, he was more than strong enough to manhandle Godzilla pretty much just like a rag doll during their fight. And the one thing they didn't give away in the trailer was the return of King Ghidorah. Big surprise. That's right, Monster Zero made a return. A very nice touch and a good use of continuity for any of those who saw the after credits in the King of the Monsters movie. Now, King Ghidorah was not used how I thought he was going to be brought back or how some of my friends thought. Personally, I thought they were going to use his regenerative skin and would have made sort of like a flesh coat for Mechagodzilla to pose as Godzilla and wreak havoc as an imposter, similar to how Mechagodzilla was originally introduced. My friends thought that with the detail of of King Ghidorah kind of coming back and the newspaper scrap that a giant robot was seen on Skull Island, that would have been the introduction of Mechagodzilla, but instead what we got was Kevin's skull hooked up almost Matrix style to some sort of supercomputer that allowed people to drift Mechagodzilla like a pilot from Pacific Rim. Later in the film, we are showed that even in death, King Ghidorah is capable of being a threat as he was able to think and assert control over technology as Kevin took full control over Mechagodzilla, which was a nice nod and sort of like an Easter egg reference to the film Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, a film in which the uh, frame of Mechagodzilla was made from the skeletal remains of the original Godzilla, and he would then take over Mechagodzilla and kind of just do whatever he wanted. Kevin basically doing the same thing. Uh, it's sort of like Kevin was drifting Mechagodzilla, and he obviously was still pretty pissed at Godzilla for ripping off his head and killing his brothers. Which I guess that forms a good segue into the monster fights in general, which were done very well. I thought they were done very well. While King of the Monsters does have a lot of monster confrontation, as does kind of the Godzilla 2014 film, it has a good bit of confrontation. Skull Island, more along the lines of actual monster combat. And by that, I mean, instead of showing a monster getting one or two hits in, and then the camera sort of like forces itself to a different scene or different perspective, in King of the Monsters, we get full on scenes of just that last for several minutes of Godzilla and King Kong just duking it out. Each monster also really played to their strengths. Godzilla just throwing his weight around, knocking over buildings, and often sending Kong flying with a single hit. Meanwhile, Kong was climbing and jumping from buildings to give Godzilla a few gravity assisted punches to the face and would just be able to swing around. He was definitely able to move around more quicker than Godzilla, which gave Godzilla a little bit of trouble, which he normally does with faster opponents. But whenever Godzilla does land a hit, it is pretty devastating as he packs a much harder hit. I personally give this film a strong 7 out of 10, maybe even an 8. Uh, I would recommend any Godzilla fan or giant monster movie fan to go see this film. In my opinion, it's not as good as King of the Monsters, but it's still much better than the other Legendary Godzilla films or even the Pacific Rim films. And kind of just speaking on the whole Godzilla versus King Kong aspect, I've watched a couple videos and I've heard a couple people speaking, and they all kind of like said the same thing of how can King Kong stand a chance against Godzilla when King Kong is so small. And it kind of just seems that like a lot of people either forget or don't know that this movie, along with it being a sequel to this Legendary Godzilla series, is also a remake, as there was a Godzilla vs. King Kong that came out way long ago in '62. And it just sort of feels like that people forget that there was a time when King Kong and Godzilla were the same size. Granted, they were not exactly the same size in this film, like they were in the original, but you know, that's all right. Godzilla, they made Godzilla pretty huge. He seems to still be going through growth spurts in this film series, so it's hard to just make another monster as big as him. But they definitely souped up Kong a little bit to where he can actually, not get just one shotted and obliterated by Godzilla. But also speaking on the fact this is a remake as well, throughout the film there are several scenes that pay homage to the original, as well as several sort of, well, I guess you can call those scenes Easter eggs. And yeah, if you go back and watch the original, you can probably pick them out in this newer film. I will say the only thing that I'm a little disappointed in, that I'm I'm actually also a little surprised they didn't throw in, was that they did not give King Kong taser fists. In the original film, whenever Kong is struck by lightning, he actually gets empowered by it, and it gives him what I just call taser fists, because his hands are coursing with electricity, and him just touching Godzilla, it hurts him. But in this new film, they did give him that really cool dorsal spine axe that can absorb Godzilla radiation, which I thought was pretty dope. Uh, kind of spoilers, it doesn't really help him in the fight with Godzilla, which I thought was a little funny, that even by making King Kong bigger and giving him a specialized Godzilla slaying tool, it really still doesn't help him in the fight. But it comes in pretty clutch in the fight with Mecha Godzilla. But despite me enjoying this film, which I did a lot, and me thinking it's a pretty good movie, it's not perfect. It does have some flaws, and there are one or two things that kind of make me go, why was this a creative decision? You know, what was the reason for this? The first thing that kind of made me go, why or what, was the part of the opening scene with the sort of monarch displays that showcase all the previous monsters that have been shown in this series, and we're going through listing them as defeated with a big ol' X marking them out. It showed, the Mutos, Ghidorah, the Skull Crawlers, and then it showed Rodan and the other kaiju that we were under the impression were still alive and still around. And it kind of just, gives that impression that, oh, I guess they are dead. Because it has sort of a split screen to it, where it has a lineup of defeated kaiju going up to Godzilla, and a line of defeated kaiju going up to King Kong. Because there was the newspaper clipping that was like, kaiju headed to Skull Island or something. And apparently Kong did not like that and killed them. He was not about sharing his territory at all, which does make some sense, because when you first get to see him, you do notice that he does have like more scarring on his chest and arms, leading to believe that he's probably had a few more fights since that big fight with the Skullcrawler so long ago. Granted, this was this is probably just me misinterpreting the information displayed, or maybe that is the correct assumption they wanted to deliver. And from my understanding, it's just that there wasn't enough budget to give scenes to all these other monsters, which I guess in the end is good because it does keep the focus on Godzilla and King Kong, which is where the focus deserved to be. This is a movie about these two kaiju specifically. The next thing that kind of made me go why, which I can understand from a certain aspect, but it was the re-inclusion of Mark and Madison Russell. It was truly not too surprising to see them pop up again in the movie trailers, given that they were, I guess you can call them prominent characters in King of the Monsters. But I feel like the roles they had in this film could have easily been done by anyone else. Any new character could have filled their role. That's just really a minor grievance of trying to do reoccurring human characters, trying to focus a perspective on the humans. But that's just a personal grievance of mine of humans taking away focus from the monsters. And speaking of unneeded roles, the the actor Julian Dennison, he played essentially the main kid from Deadpool 2. That's probably where most people would know him from. In this film, he plays as Madison's friend, and once again, he's kind of one of those roles that didn't really need to be there or could have been filled by, well, I would say, yeah, his roles really didn't need to be in the film. His main roles were he acts as a ride for Madison to get from point A to point B to move the plot around, which, I mean, Madison's character could have easily just found a ride from anywhere. He was also supposed to sort of act as her voice of reason, as she kind of just is very dead set on doing stuff. He was supposed to maybe act as sort of like, maybe think about this decision before you do it, and she does not listen to him at one point in the movie. So it's kind of like, why is he even with her when she's not even going to consider listening to him once? And then in the very end, sort of more spoilers. He helps with the defeating of Mechagodzilla. He spills some of the booze from the character Bernie Hayes into the control panel, which kind of messes up some of Mechagodzilla's controls, giving Godzilla and King Kong a little bit more reaction time to dispatch him. But I mean, Madison could have had that realization and spilt the booze, or Bernie Hayes could have had that self epiphany. And it's just, you know, these sort of like focuses on these characters, while they didn't eat up too much time of the movie, from what I can remember, that could have been more time that could have been, either shortened a little bit, or, I mean, not really even needed to give King Kong and Godzilla even more screen time. And there were a handful of scenes that came off as maybe a little too cliche or campy, that didn't have a sort of realistic flow to the dialogue, but all that's really fine. The only real other big thing that I kind of have an issue with the writing choices for this movie was how they dealt with the traversal of the Hollow Earth. In Godzilla vs. King Kong, they needed a special type of aerial vehicle to make the descent. As part of the descent, they were whirled through some kind of wormhole, and they acted like this was the only way to get to the Hollow Earth were through these wormholes. But then later in the film, Godzilla burns a hole straight through the ground to the Hollow Earth. Now, this scene is both super cool and also very ridiculous because If Godzilla has this much power, how is there any way that any of these other monsters are actually withstanding his blasts? But anyway, everyone kind of just comes back up through this hole that Godzilla made to the surface with no need of a wormhole. And even in the film King of the Monsters, the humans traveled to one of Godzilla's worship temples where they didn't need a wormhole. They kind of were just sucked through like just what seems to be a regular hole that went deeper into the earth. But speaking of the temples, getting to see Kong's temple complete with a throne was pretty rad. It definitely had some sort of weird ancient tech thing going on with it that was never really explained, but I guess it didn't need it to be. The only thing a little off with it was seemingly a homage to Godzilla's spirit species within Kong's temple. When Kong lined up some of the axes into these special little holes, they began to soak up energy and illuminate, and they formed the outline of Godzilla. Now, if they were a warring species, which it has been hinted and discussed many times that they were, whose worshippers more than likely also had war amongst each other as well, then why would they have what looks like a homage to Godzilla species in the Kong Temple? It's just a little weird. Because, I mean, even the axe blades were the literal dorsal plates from another Godzilla. So that scene, it does look cool, but it's just a little weird that it exists. But in all, the small grievances I have with this film do not take away from how awesome it is or how much I enjoyed it. I have currently seen it twice in theaters. I may even go see it a third time, but yeah, this was just a really good movie. I recommend it to everyone. Sometimes I catch myself being a little too critical of films I'm enjoying because, you know, it's not that serious. This is just a movie about giant monsters fighting. Just enjoy it, which I did, as I've said several times. But yeah, that's really about the end to this review. Just to say it again, I really enjoyed this movie. I hope everyone who goes and sees it enjoys it. If you haven't had a chance to go see it, uh, if for some reason you're watching this video, go see it anyway. Or I think it's still showing on HBO at this point in time, so watch it on there, or just I guess wait for the DVD to come out, watch it there. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed my content, and if you did and want to see more of it, like, subscribe, and yeah. As anyway, see you later.